Just this week, the BRICS nations have made an announcement that I think will change the global monetary order forever, okay? Vladimir Putin has essentially given the West and the United States the massive middle finger and said, guess what? We are going to go create a new global reserve currency with our friendly nations, Russia, China, India, South Africa, and Brazil. And to make matters even worse for the West, Iran and Argentina also want to join this BRICS partnership. And this BRICS partnership is a whole lot more powerful than a lot of people are recognizing, okay? They have 25% of the world's landmass. They have 40% of the world's population. They also control over 50% of the commodities that are produced around the world. And guess what? They also have over 70% of the gold holdings held by central banks all around the world. So naturally, a lot of people are saying, yes, the West is screwed, the US dollar is screwed, and it's going to lose its global reserve currency status as this petrodollar system continues to unwind. But I think a lot of people are missing a few important factors and points that kind of go overlooked today in the mainstream economic circle. So in today's video, I'm going to be showing you those overlooked points. I'm also going to be analyzing what I think of this recent BRICS announcement, and I'm also going to show you who I think is going to be the next global reserve currency holder of the world, and how Bitcoin fits into all of this very complicated geopolitical to and fro that is going on around the world. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. Welcome back to the Fix the Money, Fix the World YouTube channel. If you are new here, my name is Luke and I make educational videos on macroeconomics, geopolitics, and just basic financial education because we all haven't been taught about money in school, and I think it's an absolute crime. So let's fix the money and fix the world. But let's get straight on into this video, okay? Because I think lots of very interesting things have emerged. By the way, this video is brought to you by my three amazing show sponsors: the BitBox02 Hardware Wallet, Hodling Apparel, and the Bitcoin Day Conference. We will hear from all three of those later in the video, but getting straight into it, okay? The big news is the BRICS nations are talking about creating a new global reserve currency. But who are the BRICS nations? Let's break that down for anyone who's new. So BRICS, that stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Now, these are the permanent members in the BRICS group, okay? But there are also what they call kind of observer countries. So they are the countries listed below. So what actually happens is these countries are actually in the process of applying to become part of the permanent BRICS group, okay? This kind of group, or this kind of coalition, has only been going on for the past 14 years. And the BRICS summit that just happened 3 weeks ago was hosted in China, okay? So that was the 14th BRICS summit that Putin made that massive speech, and these countries have made that agreement. So the BRICS countries, think of it as like a G5, except instead of the largest 5 countries, these are kind of like the largest 5 emerging markets. So the G7 is the 7 largest developed nations, okay? So we have the EU, Canada, France, Germany, UK, the US, Japan, and Italy. So they are the G7, okay? But the E7, or emerging 7, is currently made up of the BRICS countries, which right now is 5 countries, the BRICS, and then we also have some interesting potential additions to the BRICS group, which we will be talking about very shortly. But let's have a quick little analysis about the details of this BRICS group, okay? So they house 42% of the world's population live in these 5 BRICS countries, okay? So, and you can see out of the BRICS countries, China and India account for 87% of that population, and China is the economic powerhouse in BRICS. So we can see China is responsible for 67% of the GDP in BRICS, India 13, Brazil 11, Russia 7%. So now let's jump onto another chart that kind of breaks down the BRICS. And we can see that 60% of the world's landmass also is taken by these 5 BRICS countries. And they also have 14% of the world's GDP, okay? So that is a significant portion, okay? It's nothing to sneeze at. And most importantly, you can see the portion of GDP coming from these 5 BRICS countries is growing by the day. Okay, so this chart here is from I don't even want to pronounce that, Statistica, and you can see since the year 2000 to the year 2020, the GDP being produced by these countries is growing exponentially. Okay, it's very interesting. And what else is very interesting is a lot of these countries are exporting nations, so they actually produce goods and services and they export them to the world. Okay, case in point being China, and then obviously Brazil is the 4th largest food exporter in the world. And what's very interesting is Russia now controls a large portion of the global wheat supply. Okay, so before we even went into this crisis, we can see Ukraine was one of the largest wheat exporters around the world, producing 18.1 million tons of wheat per year, and Russia was the largest wheat exporter, exporting 37.3 million tons of wheat in that year. And now that Russia has invaded, they actually control well over 30% of the global wheat supply. Okay, and we can see what countries that wheat goes to. Okay, let's take a look at Egypt. That's a country I really want to highlight. Egypt is massively dependent upon Russia now for their wheat imports, and we all remember what happened only 10 years ago in the Arab Spring, where lots of countries in the Middle East were left starving as food prices doubled in the space of only 3 to 4 years, as our favorite central planners turned on the money printers in response to the '08 global financial crisis. But we're not going to go down the rabbit hole of what the Arab Spring was in around the 2010-11 region. We'll save that for another video. What I want to focus on is what's going on with these countries. So we have Turkey, which again was in one of those charts that's a heavy wheat importer, along with Egypt, another heavy wheat importer, are trying to join the BRICS countries. Okay, do you see what's happening here, guys? And then to make matters even worse for the West, we also have Iran and Argentina, who have currently applied to become a part of this BRICS partnership. So what's the importance of Iran and Argentina? Well, very importantly, Argentina is actually the largest economy in Latin America, and this Reuters article came out in June 2018, and it's kind of showed how China has been infiltrating Latin America, and they've been increasing the amount of trade that they're doing with these Latin American countries. So this little chart here shows the amount of trade that Latin America is doing with the US, which is the blue line, versus how much trade these Latin American countries are doing with China. So you can see since 2016, the amount of trade that is being done with China is increasing. And since 2015 to 16, the amount of trade that Latin America is doing with the United States has largely been on a downtrend. So that is a very important thing to take note of, okay? Because Latin America is on the border of the United States. Obviously, remember what happened with the Cuban Missile Crisis, okay? The Soviets weren't allowed to have missiles in Cuba for very long. The US reacted pretty violently because it's a threat to national security. But here's another chart. So this chart shows who's doing more trade with who. So the blue, okay, so the blue countries up here, this highlights that the United States is doing more trade with Mexico than China is doing, okay? So same thing with Colombia, more trade is being done. Colombia is doing more trade with the United States than China, and the red is where China is doing more trade with these Latin American countries than the United States is. Okay, so China is expanding its economic touch all around the world, and it's doing this through this Belt and Road Initiative, where it's setting up strategic trade partnerships with countries all around the world. That we could probably get into in another video. If you guys want to see me do a video on the geopolitical aspect of this and kind of the importance of countries' trade relationships tied to their geographical locations, let me know in the comments down below. I can do a video on that. But we won't have the time to cover that in today's video. I want to look at the economic consequences alone. So this is the final chart. Just taking a look at China's economic footprint in Latin America, and you can see exports to China from Latin America has been on the increase since 2000, significantly, okay? That's a very interesting chart. So that's the importance of Argentina, okay? Argentina is the largest economy in Latin America, and China is trying to infiltrate Latin America. That second country that also wants to join the BRICS countries is Iran, and obviously Iran is a very interesting country geopolitically. They've been cut off the SWIFT payment system before, okay? They've had their banks cut off because the US and the West was not a fan of their nuclear weapons program. But again, this kind of gets us back to transition into what I want to talk about in today's video, and that is the monetary impacts of what we're seeing with the BRICS nations. So Saudi Arabia is the country I want to highlight here, because Saudi Arabia is very important when it comes to oil. So if we look at the largest oil producers around the world, we can see Saudi Arabia 12%, Russia 11%, Iraq 4%, Iran 3%. Very interesting. Keep note of those names. But you can kind of see who are the largest oil producers around the world. I won't play the music for this video, but you guys can see how the largest oil producers around the world have kind of changed places over the past 5 to 10 years, okay? The United States right now is the largest oil producer around the world, but Saudi Arabia and Russia is second and third. And don't forget who we were just talking about, Iran, okay? Iran is number 5 and Iraq number 6. The Middle East is very rich in oil. And you guys are probably wondering, how does all this relate to Bitcoin and the new global reserve currency status? Well, we have to understand, oil runs the world, and our current economic system is kind of inherently backed by oil. So a lot of you guys would have heard of the Petrodollar agreement, okay? The Petrodollar agreement was something that was set up in 1973, and what the US did was they essentially defaulted on their gold in 1971, okay? So for those of you who are unfamiliar with this interview here from Richard Nixon, he came out and he said, hey, guess what, world? Sorry, all those US dollars you hold around the world, they are no longer redeemable for gold. So before 1971, you could take your US dollars and take them back to the United States, and the US would give you the gold redeemable for that paper claim, okay? The paper notes isn't actually the money. The gold's the money. The gold would just sit in the banks, and we would transfer the paper receipts around because it's easier for global trade. So Nixon defaulted on the gold in 1971. The US was experiencing significant inflation in the 1970s because everybody was losing trust in the US dollar. So what current president at the time, Richard Nixon, and his good friend Henry Kissinger set up was they actually went to Saudi Arabia and they said, hey, look, can you help us out? Can you sell all of your oil in US dollars? If you make every country buy this oil in US dollars, we will give you military protection. And that's exactly what Saudi Arabia has done for the past 50 years. If you want a breakdown of the petrodollar system, I highly recommend you check out this video by my good friend Richard James, fellow Australian. He made an amazing 33-minute documentary that essentially outlines how this petrodollar system was formed and the impacts it has on the global economic system. So definitely check that one out. It's free, it's on YouTube, criminally underfollowed and criminally underwatched. But that was anyway the 60-second TLDR of the petrodollar system. Now, just recently, Saudi Arabia has said, yeah, you know what? We actually wouldn't mind joining this BRICS coalition. And yeah, you know what? If you want to buy oil from us in Chinese yuan instead of the US dollars, we're open to that. So this is massive, okay? And this is slowly changing the foundation of the global economic system, okay? For now, for the first time in 50 years, countries are looking to do trade outside of the US dollar, okay? This is very interesting. This is kind of a chart that shows you the history of what our global monetary system was based on before 1971, before Nixon closed this gold window. So you could see on the periphery all of these local currencies like the British pound, German mark, and French franc. They were all pegged to the US dollar, which was supposed to be pegged to gold. Okay, so these countries would accumulate the US dollars. It was the global reserve currency. We all use US dollars pretty much. And then you would be able to take those US dollars, give them to the US, and get your gold back. That was the foundation of the Bretton Woods system, but this all changed in the 1970s with the petrodollar system. But this went on for so long. So it went on for 50 years. Countries felt comfortable accumulating US dollars until Russia got sanctioned for when they originally invaded Ukraine. So they actually tried to take Crimea in 2014. Russia got sanctioned, and look what Russia started doing with their treasury reserves around 2013, 2014. In the red, US Treasury holdings down 89% in 5 years. Meanwhile, Russia's gold holdings up 170% in 5 years. So Russia was the first to really significantly de-dollarize their economy, but Russia wasn't the first. After 2008 and the massive bailout that the United States Federal Reserve engorged in with that $700 billion TARP bailout, you can see central banks around the world lost faith in the US dollar as a reserve currency. They lost faith in the purchasing power of the US dollar. And for the first time in 50 years, this chart shows that central banks began buying gold en masse, okay? Gold is a currency that nobody can control, nobody can dilute. This is the massive dilution of the US dollar that I'm talking about. So you can see the balance sheet of the Federal Reserve has exploded since the 2008 global financial crisis, and countries are rushing to accumulate hard money and gold and sort out trade outside of US dollars. And just recently this kind of manifested itself in Putin coming out and saying, yeah, guess what? Our Russian ruble is now backed by gold. So Putin just effectively backed the Russian ruble by gold, okay? So he pegged 1 gram of gold to be an equivalent of 5,000 Russian rubles. So of course, 1 ounce of gold is roughly, 31 to 32 grams. So based upon that conversion rate, that means that 1 ounce of gold would cost 1,600 Russian rubles, effectively putting a floor under the price of gold. So that was a very interesting move by Putin, and he finally played his hand after years of accumulating gold after that 2008 global financial crisis. And if we're going to start talking about potential alternatives to the US dollar and a new global reserve currency, it's worth knowing who holds all the gold. So here on the list you have Russia, 2,200 metric tons, sitting number 5th on the list. That's very interesting. And based upon the low amount of debt and low amount of currency that the Russia has in circulation, they're actually the most backed currency by gold. China, they say they only have 1,900 metric tons here on the list. But this next chart I'm going to show you guys gets a little bit interesting, because it'll actually show that China has a lot more gold than what they say they do. They claim they have 2,000 tons of gold, but when you take a look at China's aggregate imports of gold and how much gold they've exported over the past 20 years, you can actually see that China has something much more like 20 to 25,000 metric tons of gold that they will not declare that they have. So they tell everyone that they only have 2,000 tons of gold, when you just look at their simple exports and imports, everybody knows that they've got over 20,000 tons of gold. So this is interesting. Russia and China has a lot of gold. Russia obviously has a lot of commodities and a lot of oil. So what is the US going to do? Okay, this is the big question. Where's this new reserve currency going to go? And what's it going to be backed by, most importantly? So this kind of gets into the crux of the video. This is a macroeconomics and Bitcoin YouTube channel. So where does Bitcoin fit into this? Are the BRICS nations going to adopt a Bitcoin standard? Are they going to create a new global reserve currency backed by gold? Are they going to create a new global reserve currency backed by commodities? And is the US dollar going to die? All those questions answered in today's conclusions. But first, before I give you guys the takeaway from today's video, let's quickly hit today's show sponsor. So starting out with the BitBox02 Hardware Wallet, make sure you go and grab a Bitcoin-only BitBox02. Okay, you guys have seen the recent failure of lots of exchanges, from Celsius to even exchanges like BlockFi halting withdrawals. Exchanges are proving themselves to be unworthy of your Bitcoin or your trust. It's time that you take self-custody of your Bitcoin, put on your big boy pants, and take self-responsibility of your Bitcoin. That's what Bitcoin's all about. It's about taking self-custody and getting your money out of the banks and not having to trust a third party. So guys, go and grab a BitBox02. You can get 5% off one of these bad boys if you use a promo code BitcoinMadeSimple. That is no spaces. Bitcoin Made Simple. That gets you 5% off the cheapest and easiest hardware wallet I have ever used. Hodling Apparel, who is the best Bitcoin and freedom oriented clothing brand in the space. Trust me guys, I've been in the Bitcoin space for around 5 years now, and it's very, very difficult to find some high quality Bitcoin clothing. And like me, the two founders of Hodling Apparel were endlessly looking for more wearable, everyday Bitcoin clothing until they realized they could just make their own. And that's exactly what they've done. As you can see on the screen here guys, they offer a wide range of hats, t-shirts and sweatshirts for every type of Bitcoiner, male and female, whether they are loud maximalists or low-key sovereign individuals. So whether you're headed to the next Bitcoin conference or family reunion, get yourself some gear at hodlingapparel.com to spread the Bitcoin message in style. Today guys, you can get 20% off the entire range at Hodling Apparel if you use the promo code BMS20. So that is BMS20. That stands for Bitcoin Made Simple. And you guys can also get 15% off if it's your first time buying anything at Hodling Apparel. I highly recommend you go and check them out. My personal favorite is the Ungovernable t-shirt. I've got one of those on the way and I'll be sporting it very shortly. But massive thank you to, again, Hodling Apparel. Check them out at hodlingapparel.com. Okay, so takeaways from today's video. I think everyone around the world should be aware that if somebody can freeze your money, it's not your money anymore. Russia's central bank learned this lesson the hard way as the G7 froze $600 billion of its assets, okay? Think about this. If a country with the second most amount of nuclear weapons around the world can have its assets frozen, anybody can. That is the case for Bitcoin, okay? So moving forward, I expect people to transition away from holding fiat currency. I expect them to transition towards holding forms of money that they can hold in a self-custodial way. So that is gold and Bitcoin. I mean, Putin said it best in his speech at the BRICS summit, okay? He said, "This era has ended despite all attempts to maintain and preserve it at all costs," okay? Putin is talking about the unipolar world order. Something else that Putin said that I thought was very, very interesting was this little quote here. Putin says, "A conversation of global reserves will begin." He says they will be converted from weakening currencies into real resources like food, energy commodities, and other raw materials. Obviously, this process will further fuel global dollar inflation. So I painted a pretty dark and grim picture for the US dollar and the West in today's video. But in a future video, maybe a video just around the corner, I might give you guys a reason to be bullish on the US and the West, okay? Yes, the BRICS has a lot of power. Yes, the BRICS controls a lot of the global commodities, resources, food, and a lot of the globally held gold by central banks, but I think the United States may just play a wild card like they did in the 1970s. When everybody was losing faith in the US dollar in the 1970s after Nixon closed the gold window, Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon pulled a rabbit out of the hat and they backed the US dollar by oil, creating the Petrodollar system. So this kind of prolonged the life of the US dollar as the global reserve currency, and I think they may be about to pull another rabbit out of the hat in the not too distant future to reinstill faith in the US dollar and continue the United States' reign as the global hegemon. Now that's just a little teaser for an article I'm going to drop in the next week or so talking about the dollar milkshake thesis and the Bitcoin milkshake thesis. But I'm going to end this video on a little bit of a teaser, and I'm going to say I think all roads lead to Bitcoin. So stay tuned for a future video where we dive a little bit deeper down that rabbit hole. And if you like this one, feel free to like the video. It helps out the channel. And if you think it provided value, feel free to share it to someone who you may think could get some value from it. And of course, subscribe to the YouTube channel. I'm going to be doing plenty more videos like this in the not too distant future. So if you subscribe, you'll be able to catch a notification whenever I drop all of my latest videos. But apart from that, I hope you guys have a good day, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Now, just a little bit Now, just a little bit of housekeeping for you guys here watching on the Fix the Money, Fix the World podcast channel. I have an announcement for anyone who missed the memo. I have a new YouTube channel, okay? That is called Bitcoin Made Simple. Now, let me show you guys how to actually find that, because this is where I post all of my regular content, not just my educational videos that I post here, but also the interviews and the podcast form interviews that I do. So you go to your search bar, you go Bitcoin Made Simple podcast, and you will be able to find us. This is us here. This is our little logo. You click on here and you will see a host of videos, because I don't just post to this channel alone. I post to it with two of my other good Bitcoin friends, Phil and Corey. You will see that they also post their individual their YouTube interviews to this channel as well. Okay, so just not to confuse anyone, Phil goes by the logo ABNP, a boy named Sue, and Corey posts under the logo BMS. So you'll be able to see all of our individual shows, and you'll be able to see mine. Okay, so I post under the kind of acronym FTM. So you see this one here that I'm circling on screen, Fix the Money, Fix the World, episode number 13, and that is a interview that I conducted with two of my good friends. So anyone who missed that memo, head on over to the Bitcoin Made Simple YouTube channel, subscribe to that one so you don't miss any of my content. This is my main YouTube channel now. I post all of my content over on the Bitcoin Made Simple podcast network because it's a big benefit to me. I can actually post all of my content to Spotify as well as the Apple podcasting app. So you can also head on over to Spotify or the Apple podcasting app, and you can listen to all of my interviews and educational content on the go, in the car. If you're too busy to not actually sit down in front of your computer or TV and watch a YouTube channel, you can listen to my stuff on the go over there. So go to your favorite podcasting platforms and just simply search Bitcoin Made Simple podcast. We have the same logo, the one that I'm circling on screen right now, and you can catch all of my content while you're on the move. So thanks again, guys. Just a little bit of housekeeping.